Alright, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So the world is at a divide once again because of the Paula Deen situation. As you know, Paula Deen's show has recently been pulled from the Food Network and will not be renewed for the next upcoming season. People are up in arms and losing their stuff because they feel that I guess maybe the Food Network is making an example out of Paula Deen, or that people are overreacting once again, and black people just complain all the frickin' time because they just think their whole life is so horrible and I wish they would just shut up. You know, that's what I've been hearing on the comments and everything. So let me go ahead and give my 2 cents on everything. Now, Paula Deen, originally when I heard the story and I heard, okay, she used the N-word, I was like, I feel some type of way about it. I don't agree with her. She's in the wrong for that, but I probably wouldn't pull her show off the network. But then I heard the backstory that came along with her usage of the word, and then the fact that she proudly admitted that she used the word. Now, actually, I respected her for being honest and saying, you know, hey, yeah, I said the word, okay. I was like, cool, you're upfront about it? That's how I like it. I like when people are just upfront about their ignorance. It just makes it so much easier to tear them apart. But, you know, looking at it from a network point of view, saying if I'm a representative from the Food Network, I wouldn't want to endorse or support a person who blatantly, you know, uses the N-word, who has a horrible history of relationships with black people as far as how they run their business, as far as their black employees not being allowed to come in through the front door, having to enter through the back door, not being allowed to use certain sides of the kitchen, not being allowed to host at the front, not being allowed to do certain things that normal everyday people should be allowed to do, having to deal with playing certain stereotypical roles, like, I don't know, the slave wedding that she was originally planning to do, where the slaves would have on a nice little cute white suits and the button, freaking bow ties, you know, great stuff like that. You know, stuff like that doesn't look too well when you're a network, because people are like, if you're supporting this, we don't support you. And that's, from a business perspective, people don't want that association, which is probably why the Food Network pulled her show. You know, had it just been the issue of her saying the N-word, you know, they probably would have let it slide, because honestly, let's be real, you know, when she did say the N-word, I'm sure she probably just said it within the comfort of her peers. She didn't say it on her show. She didn't say it in an interview. She didn't do a magazine interview and say, I think all you N-words should do this. It was kind of something she said within the comfort of her own, you know, environment. And unfortunately, it got out and people responded and reacted. And the, you know, the nail in the coffin was the backstory that comes along with it and all the random questionable behavior. And then before you know it, people start digging up older interviews and they're like, wait a minute, she said this too, and she said that, and she said what about the Civil War, and what did she say about slavery? It just goes on and goes on. So I can see why the Food Network pulled the show. Now we get to the portion of the comments. A lot of people are up in arms and very, very, very agitated. And pause before we get to that, one thing I will say is Paula Deen's empire will not crumble because she lost her show. Whenever situations like this happen, especially when it deals with race, people flock to support. When Don Imus got in trouble for the nappy-headed hoes comments, alright, people flocked in to support. Yes, his show was pulled, but isn't he right back on the air? Alright, exactly. Or even this whole George Zimmerman case. George Zimmerman, the story breaks. Let's just say people flocked to donate money to George Zimmerman's defense. Flocked, hundreds of thousands of dollars, just pouring in tons of support. Okay, people will support when they feel that somebody is not being treated fairly, even though it's through the eyes of, you know, it's all about perception. All right, I'll share my opinion on that later. But anyway, going back to Paula Deen. So, one of the biggest comments I kept hearing is, well, black people are overreacting, especially when it comes to the N-word. They use it all the time, especially rappers. Rappers use it all the time, and you don't see rappers getting in trouble for using the N-word. And they have a point, but their point is a little warped, and I'll tell you why. Okay, when we look at the music industry, especially the rap industry is not run by a bunch of African Americans who work on all the African American... No, the rap industry is run by a bunch of white corporate executives, okay? That's how it works. All these major labels, or whatever, are all run by the same rich, extremely happy, nice white. And I'm not trying to make it sound racist, but honestly, let's be real. The music industry is run by a bunch of white people. Alright? Music industry is a corporate business. And in that business, certain aspects and certain traits and customs sell. And in the rap game, a bunch of ignorance, using the N-word, sexually explicit content, gun violence, drug references, all that stuff is what sells. That's the selling point in the rap game. And honestly, when we talk about the rap audience, the majority of people in the rap audience are white consumers, okay? Suburban white kids are the biggest consumers of rap music in the country. And what happens is, because there is a socially accepted realm of behavior by rappers over the last 25 years, as far as the drug references, the gang violence, the shooting, the sex, the F the gay people and use the N-word all day, that's been socially accepted for the last 25 years as in a tribute to black rap music. And basically, if you're not doing that type of music, you will not get exposure, you will not get played on any type of radio station, you will not get mainstream distribution, you will not have a major record deal, okay? There are a ton of rappers who don't use the N-word, who don't rap about sexually explicit content, who don't rap about a bunch of stereotypical and generalized things that make black people look bad. But because there is a certain group of people that run these record labels and they are well aware of what sells, these specialized rappers will never see the light of day. There are a ton of rappers who don't fall into that bubble of ignorance, but they're not going to get exposure, they're not going to get play because the music industry is run by the same small group of people who call all the shots. And it ties into radio, it ties into, well, MTV and BET don't really play videos anymore, but it ties into all of that, the exposure, the Live Nation concert deals, all of that ties into the same bubble of the same circle of people. And as long as those group of people are in charge, that's how it's always going to be, all right? When is the last time you've heard of a rapper that comes out and doesn't use the N-word and doesn't talk about, you know, who's big and mainstream, who doesn't use all these, you know, things that we look down and shame our eyes on? You know, that's just what sells. In order to make it in the rap industry, that's what you have to do. I don't agree with it, I don't support it, but I understand and recognize that that's the way the rap industry works. That's the same way with just entertainment as a whole. As an African American in the entertainment industry, a lot of the times you have to sell yourself out or become a stereotype in order to make it. It's a sad reality and I don't agree with it, and I wish more people would step up to the plate. But honestly, that's how it works. If you honestly want to be somebody who's very genuine to your community, to your craft, and just want to be somebody who's well-rounded and not a walking stereotype, most of the time, you're not going to get the same exposure as an A-list celebrity. Yeah, you'll get a record deal, but you're not going to be getting the major distribution. You'll be in somebody's back corner alley trying to perform in front of 30 people. And that's the same for movies, that's anything. If you can't do the stereotypical role, we don't want you. And that's exactly how it works. Even BET does the same thing. If you remember the group Little Brother, for all my hip-hop heads, a lot of their videos were banned from BET, not because of the content of it being too violent or anything, but it was because it was too intelligent for audiences to understand. So instead, they'd go ahead and they'd play the Soulja Boy video as opposed to a video that talks about stuff in the community. They do that on purpose. So when people say, well, rappers use it all the time, don't generalize rappers as, you know, they're the ones doing it. It's not the rappers that are doing it. It's the corporate business that is making these rappers do this in order to keep food on their table. That's the way it goes. It sucks, but that's how it is. And when we talk about the history of the N-word, people are like, you know, well, if you guys can use it, why can't we? My question is, why do you want to use the word? It's not a word that has a very positive representation. And going back to Paula Deen's argument, when people were like, well, you know, Paula said it, but big deal, so do rappers. The difference is rappers were using that word as a term that fits within the realm of the scope of their employment. Paula Deen was not doing the same thing. That doesn't fit within the scope of her employment as far as using that type of word. It had nothing to do with her empire. When you go to rap, that's what the rap game is built on, is a bunch of ignorance and stuff like that. Unfortunately, because the rap game was bought out and commercially exploited, and now it's not really genuine. Okay, so going back to the history of the word, why would you want to use a word that has such a negative connotation? That's what I will never really seem to understand. You know, it goes back to, I talk about it in all my videos, but it goes back to privilege. People want to say certain terms without any consequence or repercussions. Okay? If you say the F word, and I'm talking about the F word in relation to the homosexual community or the gay community, okay? If you use the F word, you're most likely going to be reprimanded. And even though a lot of people in the gay community use the F word amongst themselves, you can't use it if you're not in that community because you're using it as a slur. And that's how it works with the N-word. Okay? When we dig back into the history of the N-word, it was a word that was given to us. Basically our name for the past hundreds of years. Just basically used on us anytime. We didn't have an identity. We were just known as that word. After the Civil War, when the nadir period starts to begin, up until probably going into the 1920s and 1930s, okay? You had all these different films like Birth of a Nation and everything else that really made African Americans look really bad, barbaric-like, unhuman, not smart, ignorant, ape-like, all right? African Americans, we took the N-word and we also used it against ourselves. Not because we hated ourselves, but because we wanted ourselves to do better. So, whenever African Americans would see a black person doing a bunch of stereotypical stuff, doing a bunch of things that were shameful in the community, doing a bunch of things that made us look bad, all right? We would use that word on ourselves as a wake-up call. We would call you the N-word because we were telling you how stupid you looked and how you needed to step it up and get it together. Now, after the, blah, 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 lost my train of thought. But anyway, after the black nationalist movement going into the 70s and the 80s, we started to take that term back and using it as a term of endearment. Now, I don't really use the word and I don't support it, but I understand why people do use it. And that word is specific to our community. Unfortunately, it's not our fault that the world chose to give us a word that represented us. And now because we've taken that word back and we don't want anybody else to use it except for us, you know, you can't sit there and get mad, you know. Unfortunately, there isn't a word that we have for other groups of people. Unfortunately, blacks and certain other minority groups have been given terms that are not very nice and have horrible, historical recollections with them. But, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So, you can't sit here and complain because African Americans and rappers and everybody else uses this word and Paula Deen can't. Paula Deen's not in a position to use that word. That word will never have any harmful meaning to her if somebody calls that, if they call her that word, as opposed to one of us. So just because African Americans have taken that word and tried to soften the blow by using it within their own community, does not mean you have a justifiable reason to use the word yourself. As a matter of fact, things would work a lot easier if people would just leave things where they are. There's some things people just aren't supposed to understand. If you haven't lived that experience, you can't talk about it and question it because you've never walked in those shoes. Now, once again, I don't support the N-word, but I understand why people use it. Paula Deen, she'll be alright. Her empire will still grow. It's just interesting to see the comments and where everybody is with the entire story. A lot of people are really up in arms and think that people overreacted to the use of the word and think, black people, once again, we complain too freaking much and we just don't know how to let things go and we do all this other stuff, but why is it when Paula does this, there's all this overreaction? And it's kind of funny because whenever it comes to race issues in America, whenever a group is offended, the opposing group always, instead of understanding why the group is offended, they always dig for something else that the offended group did that they don't agree with, and then they try to use that against them, which is something I don't understand, which is something they're really doing in this whole Trayvon Martin case, which I'll talk about later as the trial moves on. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe, share your 2 cents. I know some of you probably hated every single thing I said, and that's just fine. Just keep it in the comment section, and please keep it to 2 paragraphs because I don't feel like reading all that crap. All right, you will not sit here and destroy my good Saturday. All right, I'm out.